Hello to everybody taking gender-based violence on campus. This, of course, is John Fobert. Not really sure why I say that every time, but hey, can't hurt to have a reminder, I guess. I hope you are enjoying the class so far. I know that I certainly am, and it's great to engage with you about the topics that we've been discussing. And the topic for this week is the causes of sexual violence. And so I want to provide a brief introduction to that topic. And of course, there are discussion questions to answer on the discussion board and readings to do and that sort of thing. The first thing I would make a comment on is simply the word cause. Because we talk about causes of sexual violence, we talk about causes of many things. But how do we know one thing is caused by another? Now, you've likely heard the term colloquially or in a statistics class that correlation does not necessarily equal causality. It's actually a bit of an overused phrase, but one of the things that I think we need to understand is, of course, just because two things go together doesn't necessarily mean that one caused the other. So just because, for example, more men than women commit sexual violence by a long shot, that doesn't necessarily mean that being male is the cause of being committing sexual violence. So we need to think carefully about how do we determine causal relationships. And there are, indeed, research methods for determining or inferring causal relationships. And those tend to be in the area of like analysis of variance. If one is doing a study using what might be called a Solomon four-square design, one of the things that does is it exposes people to a treatment, and it has an equivalent control group, and it has some people complete pre-tests and some people not. And so you basically, once you analyze post-test data, you can get a sense of whether simply taking a pre-test might have led to any differences, or whether an intervention did. And so there are ways we can talk about cause, but simply because two things go together doesn't mean one caused another. So we need to guard ourselves against the overuse of the term correlation doesn't equal causality while remembering its validity. And that is, sometimes two things go together. They have really nothing to do with each other, but they go together. So let's think about that as we approach the topic of what causes sexual violence. I would pose a few different questions to you just to think about, and of course there are questions on the website to answer to get us going, but one thing I would encourage you to think about, particularly in response to one of the articles, is do men misperceive sexual intent, or do they just not listen? Or is there something else that's going on here? But when we talk about misperceiving sexual intent, it is certainly possible to misperceive someone's intent. When we're talking about something like gender-based violence, is it really a matter of misperception, or is it something else entirely? So I just encourage you to think through that, and we can get into all those different issues on the discussion board. Another thing that I would encourage you to do is to look at the methodology for the studies, as always, as we think through their implications. And if we have a study that's just done on one campus, what does that tell us about people on other campuses? And correlation here, perhaps not causality, but I do want to talk about Lisak and Miller's study in 2002. I think it is an excellent study. It tells us a lot about what perpetrators are like. Can we, though, generalize that to every campus? I'm not sure. And one of the things I'll let you in on, I'm not directly or indirectly involved, but I do know that there'll be some research coming out hopefully in the next year, but it's been completed, that is going to raise questions, or perhaps better put, extend our knowledge of perpetrators beyond what LESAC was able to tell us. So there's that. There are lots of people who have theories about what causes sexual violence. Some people will say it's the patriarchal culture in which we live. Some will say it's male peer support. Some will say it's alcohol. Some will say it's rape myth acceptance and other attitudes. And as we try to sort those things out, let's make sure we separate fact from opinion, and let's make sure that we look at the data, figure out what it does say and what it doesn't say about ultimately what causes gender-based violence. Because if we can determine really what causes gender-based violence, it gets us a lot closer to addressing some solutions. So let's have a great week discussing these issues in a broad context with our scholarly hats on, and I look forward to the discussion.